People like you don't belong on water like this.
That's what the HOA president said as she dropped my dead wife's photo in the mud and ground it under her heel. I'd been gone 12 days. I came home to a new deadbolt and a stranger's name on my door.
You're a squatter in a dead man's shack. Crawl back to whatever gutter you came from.
Her son held up a deed with my address on it.
My parents gave me this place as a wedding gift.
I called the sheriff.
Sir, this is a civil matter. Take it to court.
Then her husband, the lawyer, smirked.
Read the fine print on your uncle's probate. It was never yours.
You're right,
I said.
I'll read it. All of it.
So I did. And the one document that family never checked turned their gift into the most expensive mistake of their lives. My name is Colton Briggs, and I've been a master electrician for 22 years. I wire buildings for a living. Hospitals, schools, commercial kitchens, the kind of work where one wrong connection can burn a whole structure down. Precision matters in my trade. Details matter. And I learned a long time ago that the people who cut corners are the ones who end up in the dark. My uncle, Captain Neil Briggs, retired from the Navy in 1974 after 26 years of submarine service. He bought 11 acres on the south shore of Smith Mountain Lake in Bedford County, Virginia, and built a cabin with his own hands over 2 summers. Red oak frame, cedar siding, a stone chimney he mortared himself using rocks he pulled from the lake bed. The property came with 200 feet of private shoreline, a deep water dock that could hold 3 boats, and the only permitted boat ramp on that stretch of the lake. In a community where lake access meant everything, Uncle Neil's cabin was the crown jewel. I spent every summer there as a kid, learned to swim off that dock, caught my first largemouth bass from the end of it. The water was so clear in the mornings you could see the bottom at 12 feet, and the air tasted like pine needles and warm cedar. Uncle Neil would sit on the porch in his old Navy cap, drinking coffee from a tin mug, and tell me stories about running silent 200 feet below the Atlantic. He never married. He said the lake was the only thing that never let him down. When Uncle Neil passed in 2019, he left the cabin to me. Clean title, no mortgage. A will drafted by a Roanoke attorney and probated through Bedford County Court. I was the sole beneficiary, and the transfer was recorded with the county clerk 6 weeks after his death. Everything was proper. Everything was legal. That cabin became my anchor after Annie died. My wife was hit by a distracted driver on Route 122 3 years ago. She was on her way to pick up Harper from volleyball practice. The other driver walked away with a scratched bumper. Annie didn't walk away at all. Harper was 14. After the funeral, I couldn't stay in our house in Roanoke. Every room had her voice in it. So Harper and I started spending weekends at the lake. I'd work the dock. She'd do homework on the porch. We'd grill burgers and watch the sun drop behind the ridgeline until the water turned copper. When Annie was alive, she used to say that cabin was the only place where time moved the way it was supposed to, slowly and with purpose. She asked me to scatter her ashes from the dock. I did. Harper held the box. Neither of us said a word. The problem arrived in 2020, when a developer named Grayson Whitfield built Lakeview Shores Estates on 60 acres north of my uncle's property. 44 homes, a clubhouse, a marina with rental slips, and an HOA run by his wife, Pamela Whitfield, heavyset, blonde, always in pressed white linen and pearl earrings the size of marbles. She drove a white Mercedes GLS and carried a leather portfolio everywhere she went, like it contained nuclear codes. She'd been HOA president since day one, and she treated the entire South Shore like her personal kingdom. First time Pamela came to my cabin, she stood at the end of my dock, and told me the HOA was extending its governance framework to include legacy lakefront properties. She said I needed to register my dock with the HOA Marina office, pay an annual shoreline assessment of $3,200, and submit to quarterly exterior inspections. I told her my property predated her subdivision by 44 years. She smiled and said, "Waterfront standards apply to everyone, Mr. Briggs. The lake doesn't care when you got here." I didn't register. I didn't pay. And I didn't think much about Pamela Whitfield until the day I came home and found a sign on my cabin that said someone else's name. It was a Thursday in late September when everything changed. I'd been in Richmond for 12 days, rewiring the electrical system in a boutique hotel on East Main Street. Harper was staying with my sister in Roanoke. I finished the job 2 days early, loaded my van, and drove straight to the lake. 2.5 hours on I-81, then south through Bedford County on winding 2-lane roads lined with dogwood and white oak. The leaves were just starting to turn, and the air coming through the window smelled like goldenrod and cooling asphalt. I pulled into my gravel driveway at 4 in the afternoon and saw it before I even killed the engine. A wooden sign, freshly painted in white cursive on navy blue, mounted on 2 posts beside the front steps. It read, "Future home of Trevor and Kelsey Whitfield." I sat in my van for a full 30 seconds, staring at that sign. Then I got out and walked to the front door. There was a new deadbolt, brushed nickel, expensive. My key didn't fit. I looked through the window. The furniture had been rearranged. Annie's old wicker chairs were gone from the living room. In their place was a drafting table covered in fabric samples, paint swatches, and a binder labeled Whitfield Lake House, Renovation Plan. A tape measure lay across the kitchen counter next to a stack of contractor quotes. I walked around to the dock. Pamela's son Trevor was standing at the end of it with a woman I didn't recognize, pointing at the boathouse and talking about converting the lower level into a gym. He was maybe 27, clean cut, wearing boat shoes and a quarter-zip pullover. He looked up when he heard my boots on the plank. "Can I help you?" he said. Like I was the visitor. I told him he was standing on my dock, in front of my cabin, on my property. He blinked. Then he reached into his back pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a warranty deed, recorded with the Bedford County Clerk's office, transferring title of the property from Lakeview Shores HOA Common Holdings to Trevor Allen Whitfield. The notary stamp was from Grayson Whitfield's law office. The recording date was 3 weeks earlier. "My parents gave me this place as a wedding gift," Trevor said. He wasn't smug about it. He wasn't hostile. He genuinely believed it was his. I called the Bedford County Sheriff's Department from the dock. Deputy arrived in 30 minutes. A young guy named Tolliver, who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. I showed him my uncle's will, my recorded deed, and the original probate documents. Trevor showed him the new deed. The deputy looked at both sets of documents, rubbed the back of his neck, and said the words I was learning to hate. "Sir, this is a civil matter. You'll need to sort it out in court." I asked him how it was a civil matter when someone filed a fraudulent deed on property I legally owned. He shrugged and said he couldn't determine which deed was valid. That was a judge's job. He got back in his cruiser and left me standing on my own dock with a 27-year-old in boat shoes who genuinely believed his mother had given him the most important piece of land in my life. Trevor's fiancée, Kelsey, pulled at his sleeve. "Maybe we should talk to your parents about this," she said quietly. Trevor shook his head. "It's handled, Kels. Mom said the transfer was clean." He looked at me with something close to sympathy. "I'm sorry about the confusion, Mr. Briggs, but you should probably talk to a lawyer." He was telling me to lawyer up over my own property, the property I'd paid taxes on for 5 years, the property where I'd scattered my wife's ashes. I could feel my jaw tightening, and I made myself walk away before I said something I couldn't take back. I drove to Roanoke that night, called every property attorney in the phone book. Most couldn't take the case for weeks. One called me back at 11 p.m. Her name was Vivian Shaw, and she had a voice like a woman who'd spent decades in courtrooms and didn't have time for pleasantries. "Mr. Briggs, what you're describing sounds like deed fraud. Can you be in my office at 8 tomorrow morning?" I was there at 7:45. Vivian Shaw spent 3 hours going through my documents. She was methodical, sharp, and she didn't waste words. By noon, she had mapped the fraud. Here's what Grayson Whitfield did. He pulled my uncle's probate file from Bedford County Court and found what he thought was a defect. Under Virginia law, when a property transfers through a will, the executor must record the new deed with the county clerk within a specific statutory window. Grayson claimed that my uncle's executor, a Roanoke attorney named Philip Crane, had missed the recording deadline by 11 days. Based on that alleged defect, Grayson filed a quiet title action, arguing that the property had never properly transferred to me. He argued it reverted to unencumbered common land, adjacent to Lakeview Shores. Then the HOA board, which Pamela controlled, passed a resolution assigning the land to Trevor. It was clean, it was calculated, and on paper it looked legitimate. But Vivian spotted something in the first hour. The quiet title action was filed ex parte, she said. That means they did it without notifying you. In Virginia, that's only legal if they can prove they made a diligent effort to locate the property owner and failed. She pulled up the court filing. The notification section listed one attempt, a letter sent to an address in Roanoke that hadn't been my address in 4 years. They never tried the cabin. They never tried my business. They never tried the phone number listed on the property tax records. They didn't want to find you, Vivian said. They wanted to file before you knew it was happening. While we were building the legal case, Trevor was building something else. He'd hired a crew out of Lynchburg, high-end renovation specialists, and they were tearing through my uncle's cabin like it was a blank canvas. In the first 2 weeks, they gutted the kitchen and installed custom cabinetry, quartzite countertops, and a 6-burner Wolf range. They ripped out Uncle Neil's original heart pine floors and replaced them with engineered white oak with radiant heating underneath. They demolished the back wall of the living room and put in a floor-to-ceiling window facing the lake. Every morning I checked the property from across the cove through my binoculars and watched the trucks come and go. Plumbers, tile setters, a crew that spent 3 days extending the dock by 40 feet and adding a covered boat lift rated for 12,000 pounds. I watched them build a stone patio overlooking the water with a built-in fire pit and seating for 20. I kept a spreadsheet. Every contractor truck, every delivery, every visible improvement. Vivian told me to document everything and wait. In Virginia, she said, permanent improvements made to real property become part of the real property. They belong to whoever holds legal title to the land, not to whoever paid for them. She paused. If we win the title case, every dollar he's spending becomes yours. I understood the math, and I understood the strategy. So I watched Trevor Whitfield pour his savings into my uncle's cabin, and I didn't say a word. Pamela made the waiting harder. The same week Trevor's crew started demolition, she sent me an official HOA notice, printed on heavy cardstock with the Lakeview Shores seal embossed in gold, banning me from all Lakeview Shores common areas, including shoreline access within 200 feet of the Whitfield property. She posted it on the community bulletin board. She emailed it to every HOA member. The subject line read, "Disgruntled former owner harassing new resident. Please report any contact." She also filed a formal trespass warning with the sheriff's department, claiming I had been loitering near the Whitfield property and making threatening statements. I hadn't made a single threatening statement. I hadn't spoken to Trevor since the day on the dock, but the trespass warning went into the system. And now, if I set foot on the road that led to my own cabin, I could be arrested. I wasn't a former owner. I was the current owner. But to the 63 families in Lakeview Shores, Pamela's version was the only version they'd heard. And to the Bedford County Sheriff's Department, I was the name on a trespass warning, not the name on a legitimate deed. The engagement party was the hardest night. Pamela threw it on a Saturday in mid-October, 3 weeks after I first found the sign. She set it up on my dock, the dock Uncle Neil built from pressure-treated pine and galvanized steel bolts he'd ordered from a marine supply catalog. The dock where Annie and I watched thunderstorms roll across the lake. The dock where Harper caught her first bluegill and screamed so loud the neighbors thought someone fell in. I was parked in the public access lot half a mile south, sitting in my van with the window down. I could see the lights from there, paper lanterns strung along the dock railing, a catering tent on the stone patio Trevor's crew had just finished, the sound of a live acoustic guitar drifting across the water, mixing with laughter and the clink of glasses. 80 people, on my land, celebrating a gift that was stolen from me. I called Harper. She was at my sister's house doing homework. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked. She always knew. Even over the phone, even without seeing my face, Harper could hear the weight in my voice the way Annie used to. I told her I was fine. I wasn't fine. But she was 16, and she'd already lost her mother, and she didn't need to carry my anger on top of her grief. I told her I loved her and hung up before my voice cracked. I sat there for another hour. The music stopped around 11. The lights stayed on until past midnight. I could hear Pamela's laugh carrying across the water, high-pitched, confident. The laugh of a woman who believed the world rearranged itself to accommodate her. I gripped the steering wheel until my knuckles went white, then let go, started the engine, and drove home. The next morning I drove to the cabin. The party had left its marks. Tiki torch stakes pushed into the soil near the shoreline, a champagne cork wedged between the dock planks, cigarette butts in the flower bed Annie had planted with black-eyed Susans the last spring she was alive. The flowers were crushed flat. I picked up every piece of trash and put it in a bag. Then I stood at the end of the dock, my dock, and looked out at the lake. The water was still and gray in the early morning light. Mist hung 2 feet above the surface, like smoke that couldn't decide where to go. A blue heron stood motionless in the shallows near the boathouse, one leg raised, waiting for something only it could see. I could still smell Annie's ashes in the wood if I pressed my face close enough to the railing. Or maybe I just wanted to believe I could. I ran my hand along the dock rail. Uncle Neil had sanded this railing smooth with a belt sander over the course of a whole weekend in 1998. I was 14, and I helped him. He taught me how to read the grain so the sandpaper didn't chew up the surface. "Everything worth building is worth finishing right," he'd said. Now someone had zip-tied a string of paper lanterns to that same railing, and the zip ties had left deep grooves in the wood. I cut every zip tie with my pocket knife and put them in the trash bag. The wood underneath was scarred, pale gouges where the plastic had bitten through the finish Uncle Neil had spent a whole Saturday applying. You could feel the damage with your fingertips. Some things can be sanded smooth again. Some things carry the mark forever. Pamela pulled up in the Mercedes while I was still standing there. She stepped out in yoga pants and a cashmere wrap, holding a travel mug that probably cost more than my first set of lineman's pliers. She walked down the slope like she owned the ground. "Mr. Briggs, you are trespassing on my son's property." Her voice was flat and practiced. "I've already contacted the sheriff, and I'm prepared to file a restraining order if you don't leave immediately." I held up the bag of trash. "Your party left a mess on my dock." She tilted her head. "It's not your dock anymore, Colton. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for everyone." I looked at her for a long time. The morning sun was behind her, and for a second she was just a silhouette, a shape with no features, no expression, just the outline of someone who believed she could take anything she wanted because no one had ever told her she couldn't. "Pamela," I said, "you should be more careful about what you give away." She frowned. I put the bag in my van and drove away. Not because she was right, because I was 3 days away from the moment that would change everything, and I wasn't going to let Pamela Whitfield see it coming. Vivian Shaw called me on a Tuesday afternoon, and her voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. Not anger, excitement. "Colton, I need you in my office. Now." I drove to Roanoke in 90 minutes. Vivian had 3 documents spread across her desk, and she was pacing behind her chair like a defense attorney who just found the murder weapon in the prosecution's coat. "Your uncle was smarter than anyone gave him credit for," she said. She picked up the first document. "This is a codicil, an amendment to your uncle's original will. It was filed with the Bedford County Probate Court 6 months before he died. The codicil specifically addresses the recording timeline and authorizes the executor to record the deed at any time within 12 months of the probate closing. It's signed, witnessed, and notarized." I stared at the document. "If the codicil exists, then there's no defect in the transfer." "Correct. The entire basis of Grayson's quiet title action disappears. Your deed is valid. It was always valid. Then why didn't it come up in the quiet title filing?" Vivian picked up the second document. "Because Grayson didn't include it. The codicil was part of the probate file. He had access to it when he pulled the records. He chose to file his quiet title action without mentioning it. In legal terms, that's not an oversight. It's a fraud on the court." Here's what most people don't know about quiet title actions in Virginia. When you file one, you're required to present all known documents related to the chain of title. Deliberately withholding a document that contradicts your claim isn't just unethical, it's grounds for sanctions, disbarment, and criminal prosecution. Grayson Whitfield didn't just cut a corner, he hid evidence from a judge. But Vivian wasn't done. She picked up the third document, a printout from the Virginia State Bar's online records system. I ran Grayson Whitfield's name through the bar database. 3 complaints in the last 6 years. 2 were dismissed. 1 resulted in a private reprimand for, guess what, failure to disclose material documents in a real estate transaction. She set the paper down. Same trick, different victim. I sat in Vivian's office and felt the floor shift under me. This wasn't a one-time overreach by an entitled HOA president. This was a practiced method, a system. Grayson found the legal cracks. Pamela provided the HOA cover. And together, they moved lakefront property from people who'd owned it for decades into the hands of people they chose. I asked her to pull the property records on the 2 other lakefront parcels Pamela had been eyeing. Vivian made some calls. Within 48 hours, she had the full picture. The Caldwell cottage on the East Shore, transferred to Pamela's college roommate through a similar quiet title action in 2021. The Ashford cabin on the peninsula, transferred to Grayson's law partner through an HOA abandonment resolution in 2022. Both properties had minor probate or recording technicalities that Grayson exploited. Both owners were elderly or out of state. Both transfers were done ex parte, without notification. Pamela and Grayson weren't just stealing my cabin. They were running a lakefront real estate theft ring disguised as HOA governance. And Grayson's law license, the same license the state of Virginia trusted him to use ethically, was the tool that made it all look legitimate. 3 families, over $500,000 in stolen equity, all of it hidden behind HOA letterhead and a notary stamp from Grayson's own office. The next 3 weeks were controlled and deliberate. I moved like I was wiring a high-voltage panel. Every connection precise, every sequence planned. No room for a spark in the wrong place. First move, the codicil. Vivian filed a motion to vacate the quiet title judgment based on fraud on the court, attaching the original codicil as Exhibit A. She also filed a lis pendens on the property, a public notice that the title was in dispute. That meant Trevor couldn't sell, refinance, or transfer the cabin until the court resolved the case. His wedding gift was now legally frozen. Second move, the other victims. I tracked down Evelyn Caldwell first. She was 78, living with her son in Charlottesville. When I told her what I'd found, she was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I knew something was wrong. I just didn't have the energy to fight it." She'd owned the cottage for 31 years. Her husband built the dock. She signed an affidavit that afternoon. The Ashfords were harder. Tom Ashford had passed the year after losing the cabin. His widow, Doreen, lived in a nursing home in Winchester. Her daughter drove down to meet me at Vivian's office. She cried when she saw the documents. "Dad died thinking he'd done something wrong with the paperwork," she said. "He blamed himself." The daughter signed on Doreen's behalf with power of attorney. Third move, the bar complaint. Vivian filed a formal complaint with the Virginia State Bar against Grayson Whitfield, documenting 3 separate instances of withholding material documents in real estate transactions. The bar complaint triggered an automatic investigation, which meant Grayson's entire case file would be subpoenaed. Fourth move, the renovation ledger. Every day for 3 weeks, I parked across the cove and photographed the work happening at my cabin. I kept a detailed spreadsheet, dates, contractor names, license plates, visible work completed, estimated costs. By the time I was done, my ledger showed over $180,000 in permanent improvements. New kitchen, new floors, expanded dock, stone patio, smart home system, custom lighting throughout, a jacuzzi on the back deck overlooking the lake that must have cost $15,000 alone. Here's the legal principle that made all of this matter. In Virginia, the doctrine of permanent improvements says that any improvement permanently affixed to real property becomes part of that property. It doesn't matter who paid for it. It doesn't matter who installed it. Ownership follows the land, not the labor. If the court restored my title, which it would, every dollar Trevor spent became mine. His quartzite countertops, his radiant heated floors, his 12,000-pound boat lift, all of it, mine. Vivian told me I could have filed an emergency motion to stop the renovations. I could have warned Trevor. I could have saved him $180,000. I didn't. not out of cruelty, but because the law doesn't require a property owner to protect a trespasser from his own spending decisions. Trevor had the resources to hire his own attorney and conduct his own title search before spending a dime. Any reasonable buyer or gift recipient would have run a title check before pouring 6 figures into a property. He chose to trust his mother instead, and his mother chose to steal. Here's a practical takeaway for anyone watching. Before you spend a single dollar improving real property, verify the chain of title yourself. Don't rely on a family member's word. Don't rely on an HOA resolution. Pull the deed. Pull the probate file. Read the documents with your own eyes. Because if the title isn't clean, every dollar you spend belongs to whoever actually owns the land. I watched Trevor's contractors haul a 10-foot quartzsite island into my uncle's kitchen on a Tuesday morning. 2,000 pounds of stone carried by 4 men through a door my uncle framed with his own hands. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. Fifth move, the press. I called the investigative desk at WSLS in Roanoke and asked for a reporter named Dale Kessler who covered real estate fraud. I gave him the outline: an HOA president and her lawyer husband stealing lakefront property through forged deeds and hidden probate documents. He wanted documentation. I sent him the first 40 pages that night. He called back the next morning. This is a 3-part series. When's the court date? The hearing was set for November 14th. Bedford County Circuit Court. Judge Helen Thatcher presiding. Everything was in place. The codicil, the victims, the bar complaint, the renovation ledger, the press. All I had to do was walk into that courtroom and let the truth do what Pamela Whitfield never expected it to do: show up on time. Pamela found out about the Lis Pendens on a Monday morning. I know because Trevor called me. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly since the day on the dock. His voice was tight. "Mr. Briggs, my mother says you filed something with the court that's blocking the title on the property. She says it's harassment." I told him to ask his father to show him the original probate file, all of it, including the codicil. There was a pause. Then Trevor said, "What codicil?" He didn't know. His own father had hidden the document from the court, and apparently from his own son. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the sign on my front steps and Annie's black-eyed Susans crushed flat under party shoes, and the feeling passed. Pamela's response was immediate and vicious. Within 48 hours, she filed a formal HOA complaint accusing me of property fraud, harassment of a board-approved resident, and malicious interference with community governance. She called an emergency board meeting and pushed through a resolution permanently banning me from all Lakeview Shores common areas: roads, marina, beach access, everything. She even tried to get the county to revoke my septic permit, claiming my system was contaminating the lake. The septic complaint triggered a county health inspection. An inspector in a county truck spent 2 hours testing my system with a probe and a clipboard. He found it in full compliance. Better than compliance, actually, because Uncle Neil had over-engineered the drain field when he built it. The inspector stood on my property, looked at the pristine lake water, and told me off the record that in 20 years he'd never seen an HOA president file a septic complaint as a personal weapon. "Between you and me," he said, "I tested 3 systems in Lakeview Shores last year that were actually leaking. None of them got complaints filed." He paused. Funny how that works. Pamela also sent letters to my electrical contracting clients, 3 of them, claiming I was under investigation for property fraud, and suggesting they might want to reconsider their business relationships. 2 clients called me worried. One nearly canceled a $30,000 hospital rewiring contract. I had Vivian send Pamela a cease and desist for tortious interference with business relations. Pamela ignored it, but the letter itself became evidence. Grayson escalated on the legal front. He filed a motion to dismiss Vivian's fraud complaint, arguing that the codicil was improperly executed and therefore invalid. Vivian responded with a certified copy from the probate court, showing the codicil had been accepted, recorded, and incorporated into the final probate order 5 years earlier. Grayson had known this. He had filed his motion anyway. Then, Grayson did something that changed the entire trajectory of the case. Vivian had requested the original probate file from the Bedford County Clerk's office as part of discovery. When the file arrived, the codicil was missing, not misfiled, not in the wrong folder. Gone. The clerk's office confirmed it had been in the file as recently as 6 months ago, the last time someone had requested a copy. That someone was Grayson Whitfield. Vivian immediately filed a motion for sanctions and a criminal referral for tampering with court records. In Virginia, removing or destroying a document from a court file is a Class 6 felony. But we didn't need the original anymore. We had the certified copy from the probate court. We had the bar's subpoenaed version. And we had the clerk's access log showing exactly who had checked out the file and when. Grayson Whitfield had stolen evidence from a courthouse, and he'd left his signature on the checkout sheet. Here's something worth knowing. In Virginia, court records are public documents protected by state law. Removing, altering, or destroying a document from a court file isn't just unethical. It's a Class 6 felony under Virginia Code 18.2-169. The penalty is up to 5 years in prison. And unlike most white-collar charges, tampering with court records is almost impossible to defend because the access log is the evidence. You signed in. The document was there. You signed out. The document was gone. That's not a circumstantial case. That's a timeline with your name on it. Grayson was doing the same thing Pamela always did, treating the system like it belonged to him. Every move he made to cover the fraud created more evidence of the fraud. Vivian looked at the access log and said, "He's not a lawyer anymore. He just doesn't know it yet." 2 weeks before the hearing, Pamela made her most desperate move. She showed up at Harper's school, Bedford County High School, 3:15 on a Wednesday afternoon. Harper was walking to the bus when a white Mercedes pulled up to the curb, and Pamela Whitfield stepped out, pearl earrings catching the afternoon sun. "Harper, sweetheart," Pamela said. "I just want to talk to you for a minute, about your dad." Harper is 16. She's quiet, she's smart, and she's been through enough loss to recognize when an adult is trying to use her. She didn't get in the car. She didn't engage. She walked to the bus, sat down, and called me from the back seat. "Dad, that woman from the lake was at my school. She tried to talk to me about you." The fury that hit me in that moment was unlike anything I'd felt through this entire ordeal. Not the sign on my cabin, not the party on my dock, not the deed with another man's name. None of it compared to the feeling of someone approaching my daughter. My 16-year-old daughter, who'd already lost her mother and didn't deserve a single second more of pain. I called Vivian. She filed an emergency motion for a protective order within the hour. The judge granted it the next morning. Pamela Whitfield was ordered to stay 500 feet from Harper, her school, and our Roanoke residence. Violation would result in immediate arrest. Pamela responded by going public. She posted on the Lakeview Shores Facebook group that I was a dangerous and unstable individual who was using his daughter as a pawn in a property dispute. She claimed I had fabricated documents and was attempting to defraud her son of his legal home. 47 people liked the post. 12 left supportive comments. None of them had any idea what had actually happened. But one person who saw the post did know. Dale Kessler at WSLS. He screenshotted everything before Pamela could delete it. The social media post became Exhibit J in our court filing, evidence of a campaign of intimidation and defamation by the HOA president against the rightful property owner. 3 days after the Facebook post, something unexpected happened. A woman named Cheryl Burke, who lived in Lakeview Shores, sent me a private message. She said she'd been watching the situation and had questions about her own property. Her husband had died 2 years earlier, and Pamela had been suggesting that the HOA could help her manage her lakefront lot. Grayson had offered to handle the paperwork as a courtesy. Cheryl hadn't signed anything yet, but she was starting to understand why. I forwarded her message to Vivian, another potential victim. Another piece of the pattern. The week before the hearing, Trevor called me again. This time his voice was different, quieter. "Mr. Briggs, I looked at the probate file. I found the certified copy of the codicil in my father's office. It was in his desk drawer, under a stack of HOA minutes." He paused. "I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know." I believed him. His voice had the sound of a man who just realized his parents weren't who he thought they were. I'd heard that sound before. In the mirror, the day I found out Annie was gone and the world wasn't the safe place I'd built in my head. "Trevor, I said. I believe you, but I can't stop what's coming. I know, he said. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. About your wife's flowers. About the sign. About all of it. He hung up. I sat in my van in the driveway for a long time, staring at the phone. The street light outside flickered on, casting an orange glow across the dashboard. I thought about Trevor, 27 years old, about to get married. His parents hand him the keys to a lakefront cabin and tell him it's a gift. He doesn't question it. Why would he? They're his parents. His father is a lawyer. His mother runs the HOA. Everything looks legitimate. He hires contractors. He picks out countertops with his fiancée. He imagines raising kids in that cabin, teaching them to fish off the dock, watching sunsets from the new patio. And then some stranger shows up and tells him none of it is real. I drove to the lake and sat on the public beach, watching the last light fade off the water. A family of Canada geese paddled past in single file, unhurried, unbothered. I thought about what it means when a man apologizes for something his mother made him believe was a gift, and I thought about the difference between an enemy and a victim who doesn't know he's one yet. November 14th, Bedford County Circuit Court. A wood-paneled courtroom that smelled like old varnish and radiator heat. Judge Helen Thatcher presided from an elevated bench, reading glasses perched on her nose, a reputation for zero tolerance for procedural games. Pamela and Grayson sat at the respondents' table with their attorney, a Richmond litigator named Carter Poole, who specialized in real estate defense. Pamela wore a navy blazer and pearls. Grayson wore a charcoal suit and an expression that looked like confidence but moved like fear. Trevor sat in the gallery behind them with Kelsey, his fiancée. He didn't look at his parents. I sat at the petitioner's table with Vivian. Behind me in the gallery, Evelyn Caldwell and her son, the Ashford daughter with her mother's power of attorney, Dale Kessler from WSLS with a notepad and a court-approved recording device, and Harper, sitting in the back row with my sister, wearing the necklace Annie gave her for her 13th birthday. Vivian opened with the codicil. She projected it on the courtroom screen. The original document, signed by Uncle Neil, witnessed by 2 neighbors, notarized by a Bedford County notary public. She walked the judge through the probate timeline, showing that the codicil had been properly filed, accepted, and incorporated into the final order. The transfer to me was valid. It had always been valid. Then she showed what Grayson had done. The quiet title filing that omitted the codicil. The ex parte proceeding that never notified me. The clerk's access log showing Grayson checked out the probate file 3 months before filing his action. The same log showing the codicil was present at that time, and the subsequent log showing the codicil was missing after Grayson's access. Your Honor, Vivian said, Mr. Whitfield didn't just fail to disclose a material document. He physically removed it from the court file to prevent its discovery. That's not a procedural error. That's obstruction of justice. Carter Poole objected. Judge Thatcher overruled. Vivian introduced the affidavits from Evelyn Caldwell and the Ashford family. 2 more lakefront properties, 2 more quiet title actions with missing documents, 2 more families who lost their homes because Grayson Whitfield decided his wife's ambitions were more important than the law. The courtroom was quiet. Pamela's jaw was tight. Grayson stared at the table. Then Vivian played her final card. She introduced the renovation ledger. $183,000 in documented improvements to the cabin, all made by Trevor under a fraudulent deed. Under Virginia's permanent improvement doctrine, every dollar belonged to the legal title holder. To me. Your Honor, Vivian said, we're asking the court to vacate the fraudulent deed, restore Mr. Briggs's title, and recognize that all permanent improvements made to the property are legally his. We're also requesting that the court refer Mr. Whitfield's conduct to the Commonwealth's attorney for criminal prosecution and to the Virginia State Bar for disciplinary action. Judge Thatcher removed her reading glasses and looked directly at Grayson Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield, in 31 years on this bench, I have never seen a more calculated abuse of the legal system by a licensed attorney. You didn't just defraud your neighbor, you defrauded this court. You removed evidence from a public file. You filed sworn documents you knew to be false. And you used your wife's position in a homeowners association to give your actions a veneer of legitimacy. She put her glasses back on and read the ruling. Title restored to Colton Briggs. Deed to Trevor Whitfield vacated. All permanent improvements deemed property of the legal title holder. Criminal referral for Grayson Whitfield. Tampering with court records, fraud on the court, filing false instruments. Referral to the Virginia State Bar for disciplinary proceedings. HOA resolutions related to the property declared void. Pamela stood up. This is outrageous. That property was properly— Mrs. Whitfield, Judge Thatcher said without looking up, sit down or I will hold you in contempt. Pamela sat. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. The courtroom was perfectly still, except for the hum of the radiator and the scratch of Dale Kessler's pen on his notepad. I looked over my shoulder at Harper. She was crying. Not sad tears, the kind that come when something stolen is finally returned. She was holding Annie's necklace in one hand, pressing it against her collarbone. Behind her, Evelyn Caldwell sat with her hands folded in her lap, eyes closed, like she was saying a prayer she'd been holding for 3 years. The Ashford daughter gripped the armrest of her chair so hard the wood creaked. Trevor stood up in the gallery. He looked at his mother. He looked at his father. Then he turned and walked out of the courtroom without a word. Kelsey followed him. The door closed softly behind them. Pamela watched her son leave, and for the first time since I'd known her, she had nothing to say. Dale Kessler's story ran that evening. Part 1 of 3. The headline: Lake H.O. a president and lawyer husband accused of stealing homes through forged deeds. The aftermath moved fast. Grayson Whitfield was indicted by a Bedford County grand jury on 4 felony counts. 2 counts of fraud on the court, 1 count of tampering with public records, and 1 count of filing a false instrument. The Virginia State Bar suspended his license, pending a full disciplinary hearing. Within 3 months, he surrendered the license voluntarily. He never practiced law again. Pamela was removed as HOA president by a vote of 51-6 at a special meeting held 2 weeks after the ruling. The new board's first act was rescinding every resolution Pamela had passed regarding my property. Their second act was hiring an independent auditor to review 5 years of HOA finances. The auditor found $18,000 in unaccounted expenditures routed through Pamela's Lakefront Beautification Fund. The money had been used to pay for Trevor's engagement party catering, Pamela's Mercedes lease payment, and a family vacation to Hilton Head. Evelyn Caldwell got her cottage back. The fraudulent deed was vacated by the same court, and the title was restored to her name. She moved back in that spring. She was 78 years old, and she planted a new garden the first week. The Ashford family received a settlement from Grayson's malpractice insurance. $240,000. Doreen Ashford was too frail to return to the cabin, but her daughter told me that knowing the truth had come out was what mattered. Dad didn't make a mistake, she said. Someone stole from him. There's a difference. Now here's the part the title promised. 3 weeks after the ruling, Trevor Whitfield called me. Not angry, not hostile, humble. Mr. Briggs, I know I have no right to ask this, but Kelsey and we love that cabin. I put everything I had into it. I know it's yours. I know what my parents did was wrong, but if there's any way you'd consider letting us stay, as tenants, I'd pay whatever you think is fair. I thought about it for 2 days. I talked to Harper. I talked to Vivian. And I thought about Trevor's voice on the phone the night he told me he'd found the codicil in his father's desk. He wasn't his mother. He wasn't his father. He was a 27-year-old who'd been handed a poisoned gift and didn't know it. I called him back. $10,000 a month. First and last up front. 12-month lease. You maintain the property, you pay the dock fees, and you never let your mother set foot on that shoreline again. Trevor didn't hesitate. Done. He's been paying on the first of every month for 11 months now. Never late, never short. He and Kelsey got married in a courthouse ceremony. Small, quiet, nothing like the lakefront wedding Pamela had planned. They're good tenants. They keep the cabin immaculate. Kelsey planted new black-eyed Susans along the dock path. She didn't know about Annie's flowers. She just thought they'd look nice there. They do. Pamela Whitfield has to drive past my cabin every time she leaves Lakeview Shores. She has to see her son's car in the driveway of the property she tried to steal. She has to know that every month, $10,000 leaves her son's bank account and lands in mine. The cabin she gift-wrapped as a wedding present now generates $120,000 a year, for me. I used the first year's rent to establish the Smith Mountain Lake Property Rights Clinic. Free legal consultations for lakefront homeowners facing HOA overreach, deed fraud, or title manipulation. Vivian Shaw volunteers 2 Saturdays a month. Evelyn Caldwell bakes cookies for the waiting room. Last Saturday, Harper and I drove out to the lake. We parked at the public access lot and walked down to the shoreline. The water was flat and silver in the morning light, and the air smelled like pine bark and wet stone. Harper skipped a rock, 4 bounces, and said, "Mom would have liked that Trevor's wife planted her flowers back." I watched the ripples spread across the water and thought about Uncle Neil, sitting on that dock in his Navy cap, telling me the lake was the only thing that never let him down. He was almost right. The lake didn't let me down, and neither did the truth.
Here's what gets me about this story. Pamela didn't lose because someone outsmarted her. She lost because her own great life a trail she couldn't erase. Grace inside a courthouse checkout like with his own name and thought nobody would overlook. Carlton Roost's advantage was never anger. It was patience, documentation, and the discipline to let the legal system do what it was designed to do. He didn't blow up on the dark. He didn't confront Pamela at the party. He watched, recorded, and waited. If you take one thing from this, verify the change of title before you spend a dime on any property. Who did it? Who the probate? Read everything with your own eye. The Whitfield counted on nobody checking the paperwork. That's the only reason it works as long as it did. Now, Evelyn has her cottage back. A property rights clinic served the whole lake, and Uncle Neil's cabin still stands where he built it in 1976. If you've had an HOA try to take what's yours through paperwork and intimidation, drop your story in the comment. It's surprised if this